Thank you all again for joining. We have 3 presenters today, and I'll introduce each before they present. First, we have Emily Reinhold, RBFF's Communications Manager, to give you some top 10 tips for working with influencers.
Thanks, Joanne. We could talk about working with influencers for weeks on end and still not cover everything. But so we tried to just narrow it down here to our top 10 tips. So one is know what type of creator you need. And you might go, I thought we were talking about influencers. But here's where sometimes it can get tricky for people around terms. But what you really just need to know before you even really get started on trying to find people for your campaign is, are you looking for someone to create content for their channel about your products or programs? Or are you trying to just find someone, an influencer, who can share your content via their channels, or someone who would endorse your programs or whatever you are marketing at the time? This is important to know because there are some creators and influencers out there who are willing to create bespoke content specific to your campaign. And then there are some who are not willing to simply post your existing content as it doesn't fit their brand. But kind of knowing what you are looking for, whether just an additional distribution channel or a content creator partner, is the first step to really understand where you can go. And number 2, I mean, this is common with all types of marketing, be clear with your goals. Before you look to build your roster, make sure you understand what you're trying to do. Is it convert license sales? Is it spreading awareness of new regulations or rules? Is it collecting emails or signups? Each of these different goals will determine if a influencer is right for you and if they're comfortable with doing that. Different creators work best depending on your goals and depending on the engagement of their audiences. Number 3, I mean, this is a big one. I know that you all probably have on your mind a lot of times with your limited budgets is understanding how budgeting and pricing works with influencers. And in general, more followers means more cost, but not always. Some influencers are able to charge higher prices than you would think from their smaller follower count because they have a more engaged follower base. They know that their sponsored posts, their partner posts, get a higher engagement rate than, say, someone with more followers, so they're able to charge more because they're more efficient marketing. So this is something that you'll need to discuss with influencers. There's no one formula of what an influencer's cost is. There might be some influencers who try to price people out simply because they want fewer sponsored ads. But know going in that most influencers do not give discounts to government agencies or nonprofits, but some do. You can always ask as long as it's done in a professional and polite way, with no expectation of you getting a special discount or pricing. Some are more flexible with what type of post you're looking for. If you're expecting an influencer to create bespoke content, that requires more time on their hand. That's going to cost more money than, say, sharing a post that you have already created and drafted. So moving on to number 4, and this is when we start to look at how are we finding influencers and partners to work with. The first thing I always say is look in your own backyard. And that means look at your existing followers, look at who's engaging with your content already on social. This is a great way to find your top fans and people who want to be connected with your brand already. But going kind of outside of that, take a look at location tags. For instance, this first image I have here, Lake Cook, is a location near our offices here in Alexandria, Virginia, where you can go on Instagram and search that tag, find people who are posting from those locations. You know, especially at the state level, when you're looking for people who are specifically in your state, who have a strong following in your state, maybe this is a great way to find people who are already posting about this. You can search by top, and that will give you posts with the most likes and engagement, or recent to see who's been there most recently. Along similar, looking at the hashtags you're using. At RBFF, we use Take Me Fishing. And so these are a lot of people who are already engaging with our content, or at least even if they're not engaging with our content, they're posting very similar content, children fishing, family fishing, that sort of stuff. Mentions and tags. Plenty of people are out there tagging your agency, tagging a brand when they're doing something that involves you. So when they're making that first catch with their family, when they're exploring a new state park, anything like that, make sure you're checking your tags pretty frequently and any of your mentions. Because even if what they're tagging you in or mentioning you in at that moment is not something that, hey, you guys want to share, it's another great way to find people organically who are already involved. And then don't be afraid to check out suggestions. So both your own suggestions on your own account for who you would be interested in following, but also on any other creators that you follow or other state agencies. These social platform algorithms are pretty advanced and can help you find brands, people, influencers who are in your space. Now, you'll notice when there's a bunch of different ways to find influencers to work with. I stuck with the more organic ones on this tip, but there are plenty of platforms, marketing agencies, and influencer marketplaces that are essentially built out to give you more of that information on what influencers' follower demographics are. You can search by their topic of interest, things like that. Those typically do come with a higher price tag because of that service. So I wanted to make sure that I was providing some of the lower cost alternatives, which leads me to number 5. Don't be afraid to be a copycat. For instance, one of the things that we always try to work on the Take Me Fishing side is making sure that the influencers we work with and the social media content we share is more representative. Representation matters, whether that's gender representation, racial representation. So when you're trying to find influencers, maybe like, oh, I'm struggling there because your existing network might not be as diverse as your state population. Well, don't be afraid to look at pages and organizations like Brown Folks Fishing, who are already doing a great job of amplifying the voices of BIPOC anglers. Go on there, find more people and influencers to follow, to interact with their stuff, and then you can start building relationships from that to expand your network so that when you do go to find and make deals with influencers, you have a more diverse pool to pull from. Along that same vein, don't be afraid of looking at brands, even big businesses, small businesses, brands that are not, state agencies or nonprofits. Look what they're doing with their ambassador programs. Look what content they're creating with their ambassadors, and use that as inspiration, but also use it as a way to find more influencers that you can work with. It may not be their #1 star influencer there, but there are many brands like Hydro Flask have ambassador programs that are pretty extensive and expansive and have those smaller micro influencers who may be in your budget and who care about things in a similar vein as the outdoors, even when they're working with a large brand like Hydro Flask. And then, again, don't be afraid to copy other influencers from other organizations. For instance, on the far side, we have a Discover Boating influencer. Now, we have worked with Discover Boating on some joint influencer things, but looking at who they're reaching out to, seeing how they're expanding that way, and then not necessarily using the same influencer, but finding accounts that are like those influencers. That's when the suggestions come in handy. You start following some of Discover Boating's influencers, and you'll be able to find other similar accounts that may work better for your audience. And also, don't be afraid to learn from other brands, both inside your space and outside. You can get some great inspiration there, and especially if you're looking to grow your angler base, you may need to look at people outside of the traditional outdoor influencers. And moving on to number 6 and 7. So what do you do once you find these influencers? Well, make sure that you are finding these influencers and building out your roster before you're looking to make a transaction with them. Your first time reaching out to an influencer really shouldn't be about, hey, we want you to post this XYZ, trying to make a deal. You need to start building those authentic relationships with them beforehand so that A, you're able to make a better judgment about if and how they fit within your influencer strategy and your brand voice. And then B, creating that two-way pathway and conversation, make sure that the content that's shared feels authentic and right to both your brand and their brand. Purely transactional dealings are pretty easy to spot online, and the younger generations who are more social, who are on their phones, can spot those a mile away, and they're not as effective. This is especially important also when working with minority influencers. You want to make sure that you value who they are, who their brand is, and the value that they can bring to you, and the value of their audience. If you're only talking transactionally with them, it comes across very much as you're just trying to use them in a way to reach their audience without actually valuing what they have built and who they are. And number 7 is understanding their personal brand and voice. Know that just as your organization has a brand, has a look, has a specific voice, so do these influencers. And so this is when, if you're asking them to share your content as opposed to creating content for you, it can get a little bit trickier if it doesn't fit quite in with their aesthetic, their visual aesthetics, or their authentic voice. It's a very easy way for their followers to tune out that post because they see that it doesn't fit with them. If it doesn't feel true to the creator. Along the same lines, the creator may not be willing to work with you if they feel your brand or your messaging does not align with theirs. And I just wanted to point out on this slide, we have Outdoor Alley, who was a creator that our social media, or our digital content manager actually here at RBFF found for us to work with. She now essentially hosts the Take Me Fishing TikTok channel, which has exploded in less than a year. But she was found because our digital content manager was looking at female influencers online and found Outdoor Alley. And her content on her personal channel was really more within hunting and cooking with what she hunted. But knowing that she was also an angler, her digital content manager started that conversation with her, built that relationship, so that we were able to hire Allie on to create content for the Take Me Fishing channel. This worked out for a few reasons. One, she's an authentic voice for a brand, but because her personal channel skewed more hunting, she felt comfortable creating fishing content specifically for the Take Me Fishing channel, and without it feeling like it was competing against her own personal brand, but actually complementing the content that she was creating on her personal brand channels as well. And this is when we really get into how we make these deals work. Number 1, make sure you're writing a clear brief to your partner. It's one thing to say, hey, we'd love for you to share something for National Fishing and Boating Week. But especially when you're coming from a government agency side where you're a little bit more protective about what is said and what is posted, you want to make sure you really clean up your brief. Explain what your agency is, why you're a good fit to partner with them, what the campaign is, again, its goals, which we talked about earlier, and then be clear about if you're providing images or content for them to post, if you're providing the copy, and then if that copy can be edited by them, if it can be tweaked by them, or if you're not giving them specific copy, what's that key campaign message? What are those hashtags they need to include? Really be as explicit and clear as possible to avoid any snafus. And not just what they're posting, but where. Influencers often have multiple different channels, and the different channels can have different audiences and value You also want to be clear which content format. There's a big difference on Instagram between posting a story versus posting in feed. You want to make sure that you are both clear on which content format and which platforms posting. Again, with when, be specific about when you want it posted. Is it just sometime during the month of June, or is it a specific day, a specific time of day? And then the compensation, how they'll get paid, whether that is in dollars, whether that is in some sort of swag from you guys, whether that is in a fishing license. That needs to be made clear with date and then any terms and conditions connected to that pricing and their payment. This is a business deal. I know it's easy to think of influencer marketing as kind of just a one-off or a fun little addition, but it's not. It's a business, and you need to treat it like such. And that brings to point number 9, get a contract signed. We have a template shared with you in the handouts of this webinar, so be sure to look at that. If you're not really sure where to start, always work with your legal teams, run it by your superiors first, but a contract is how you both protect your agency as well as it helps protect the influencer. And so that just brings me to our last tip here, which again, very similar to most marketing. Measure success. Know how to measure success. Based on your goals, figure out what and how you're going to measure that success. Yes, you can simply look at, oh, they posted, but really if they're sharing links or if they're promoting some sort of sales, use trackable links. Make sure you're giving influencer promo codes so you can properly attribute the traffic on your website or your landing page to those social media posts to specific influencers. Make sure you're tracking and saving every post that your influencers are posting with links. And also, again, if you're things like the Instagram story, which disappear in 24 hours, make sure you're screenshotting those as well. And then, again, be clear about what your expectations are from them, with them sharing the private engagement information. With Instagram now, not everyone has to share how many likes are on each photo, but if you want to know that information about how many likes are on a photo, how many saves are on a photo, link clicks, swipe ups, and stories, that's stuff that you're going to have to work with and lay out with the influencer before it's posted to make sure that they understand what you expect and what data you expect them to share from their private channel to you, so you're able to properly measure and understand how successful or effective this campaign was. And so I'll just wrap it up right there. Again, these are just the top 10 tips, I think, for anyone who's looking to get started with working with influencers or testing out influencer marketing. Each of these 10 tips could have their own webinar in and of itself. So I know we'll have Q&A at the end, but also feel free to reach out to me, whether it's email or on social media, if you have any more specific questions that we don't get to.
Great, thank you very much, Emily. Those are fantastic tips. And after the webinar, we will send out an email with not only the documents in handouts, but we'll also provide presenter emails, so you have them right there for you. So all this might seem a little overwhelming, but we wanted to provide some real life examples to you. So next we will hear from Sean Good. Sean has been a fisheries biologist for the Vermont Fish and Wildlife Department for 26 years. As a fisheries biologist, he manages populations of sport and recreational fish species and manages several fishing programs. However, in the last 5 years, Sean has taken on some additional roles of fisheries outreach and angler R3 work. So he now works to increase angling participation in Vermont through generating awareness of fishing opportunities, informing and educating anglers on fish species, techniques, and motivating anglers to fish more often. So I'll turn it over to you, Sean.
All right, thanks, Joanne. So yeah, this should be interesting. I want everybody to take out a piece of paper and mark down how many of the 10 tips I violate from Emily's presentation. I think there's probably going to be a lot of them. So as Joanne mentioned, I'm a fisheries biologist. I don't really do R3 full time. I kind of do it on the side around my regular fisheries assessment responsibilities, but I've been doing more of it in the last few years. And so this ambassador or fishing influencer project that we had funded through a grant with RBFF was the first attempt. And there was a lot of learning that came along with it. But basically, what we tried to do was utilize a social media influencer project to try to retain some of the new recruited and reactivated anglers that we saw here in Vermont in 2020. So let's go to the next slide. So, why did we decide to do this? Well, it was pretty obvious, I think. Like most states in the last decade or more, we've seen kind of a pretty steady decline in fishing participation and license sales, but that all changed in 2020 with COVID, where we saw a pretty big increase for Vermont, which is a pretty small state, keep in mind. Our adult resident fishing license sales jumped up almost 27% that year. Our youth license sales went up 34%, which was, the highest increase we've ever seen in adult resident license sales since 1992 and youth license sales since 2002. So, the first and obvious question we asked ourselves is, geez, this is great. How do we keep them? What do we need to do to retain them? So next slide. Coincidentally, as Joanne mentioned, I've been kind of dabbling in R3 over the last 5 years. A lot of it has been going to RBFF state marketing workshops, where I've learned a lot and saw a lot of really cool stuff. And the opportunity to go to NCTC in 2019 to a week-long Angler R3 workshop. And I think the biggest take-home message I had from that week is it's okay to steal other people's ideas for R3 projects and see if it works for you. That's a lot of what this is. And coincidentally, the following February, right before the pandemic hit, I was at the Atlanta RBFF workshop and saw a presentation by Tim Akinma from Oregon that I thought was really cool on social media influencers. And, then the pandemic hit and everything changed. And then towards the end of that year, RBFF released their report, Casting a Wide Net, which had something in there that I saw that really kind of pulled it all together for me, which was, seeing relatable images, on social media was one of the primary drivers that new anglers cited as, the reason why they wanted to try fishing or why they stayed engaged and continued to fish. And so just all of that kind of came together. Then I saw the RFP for the grant and we thought, what the heck, let's give it a try. So I applied for it and we were lucky enough to get one. Next slide. So, not really knowing where to start, I basically called Tim up. I started out with some emails and then we ended up on the phone and he was really great. I leaned on him heavily for a lot of advice and insights. I kind of took his lead on a lot of this. And so what I started doing in the winter of 2021, I just started spending a lot more time online. I did it at home after hours, just scrolling through Facebook groups and looking at Instagram and kind of following hashtags and seeing what was out there related to Vermont fishing. I was already a member of probably the biggest Vermont specific fishing group in the state, a Facebook group called Fishing 802. It has about 12,000 members. And I've kind of developed a relationship with a lot of people on there, to the point where the group founders have recently made me a group expert. And it's mostly because I spend time answering people's questions or telling them what kind of fish they caught when they ask, put up a post and things like that. So people kind of know who I am on there. And so I started watching their posts and then following them, and then reaching out and asking them if they also had an Instagram page, and kind of finding them on there. And, I just spent a lot of time online looking at people's feeds and kind of getting a sense for what I liked and what I didn't like. And at that point, I still wasn't really sure. But when I saw something I liked, I started direct messaging potential ambassadors just to, kind of feel them out. So I had a kind of a pat, 2 to 3 sentence introduction of who I am and what I was thinking about. That I had this project where I was thinking about using influencers to just post really engaging and creative content on their own pages to promote and increase awareness of fishing opportunities in the state. And if they were interested, respond back with an email address and I would send them more information. And so I had a one-pager with a lot more detail that I would then email to them if they gave me their email address that kind of explained things a lot more. I one of the rules I clearly violated. This, bringing them on board was like an informal handshake kind of thing. No contract, no agreement, no MOU. What I was looking for were people who were already passionate. These were amateurs. They're just regular Vermont anglers. They're not influencers. This is not their job. This is not where they make money. They're just really excited about sharing fishing stories and creating really great, engaging content. And that's what I was looking for. So I found people that kind of had a wide background, diverse angling interests for species, techniques, and all that kind of stuff. Next slide. So these next few slides just kind of show you who I found. I ended up with 14 active, what I call ambassadors, come from all walks of life, lots of different backgrounds, different techniques that they're really focused in. What I really liked was, when one in particular, or I found some that fished for a lot of different things instead of just being, say, a bass angler or a fly fishing person for trout. I really liked the diversity when I saw somebody posting, content that had all sorts of different species groups. So, I tried my best to try to have as much variety and diversity there as possible. And you can go back and look at more specifics about these ambassadors in the recorded video later if you'd like. So next slide. So one of the things that we did to kind of get them to agree to come on board, or as I guess a little form of payment, another idea I sort of borrowed from Tim Akamoff was to create clothing. So this is some hats and shirts with a brand that we decided to create ourselves called Fish Vermont with the hashtag, and we drew these fish silhouettes of 4 different fish species, trout, bass, pike, and panfish, made a bunch of different color combinations. The fish silhouette shows the kind of the iconic Green Mountains of Vermont ridge line with Camel's Hump Mountain in the middle, so it's identifiable here in Vermont. And I thought they were really cool and attractive. And so all ambassadors got their pick of whatever color and shirt type and hat type that they wanted. They could get 2 of each, and I sent them out to them all. Next slide. So the people that we ended up with, as I mentioned, I think I whittled down my list of 40 or 50 potential ambassadors to about 17 that I really thought would work out well based on what I was seeing on their personal feeds. I had 17 all agree. As it turned out, only 14 ended up being active. 9 of them were males, 5 were females. We had a pretty fairly good diversity of demographic representation. Keep in mind, Vermont is not a very diverse state to begin with, so that was one challenge I had, was finding active anglers on social media that represented some of the demographics I was hoping to get. These Fish Vermont hats and t-shirts certainly made a big splash, to the point where I was getting swamped by emails and phone call requests from the general public when these started showing up on the influencers web pages, asking where they could buy them, which was a great sign. We never did make them for sale. I'm not sure we ever will, but people really liked them and wanted them themselves. So of the 14 influencers or ambassadors, we had over 100 organic, social media posts, kind of, very authentic, created by each influencer sort of on their own without much oversight or creative control at all by me. We had a lot of photo and video media assets that I'll mention here in a couple of slides from now that were developed. This was another great side benefit. We have a photographer on staff that I was able to send out with all the influencers at different times when they went on fishing trips. He would hook up with them and just basically, this person's a wedding photographer that I hired for the summer, but also a really avid angler, and they just followed the influencers around and took really great shots, gave the photos to the ambassadors for posting on their own social media pages, but we also retain all those photos and the rights to them for using for our own purposes as well. So we really increased our library of Vermont specific fishing imagery. We also use some of the influencers to create some videos that we're developing and editing and putting up on YouTube little by little, some how to fish videos, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later on. Another thing that Tim really underscored that I took to heart and was able to implement well is we made our fish management field crews available to these influencers to go out with and just volunteer with. So they went out and went electrofishing and conducted fish surveys with us. And there was no requirement. I suggested that if they wanted to, they could post pictures from that on their own pages and talk about their experiences and how they kind of saw the connection between what they witnessed out in the field with us doing fisheries management and the opportunities that provides when they're out there for fishing. And a lot of them did that, and I thought that was a really high value result of this project overall. And we ended up with over 160 hours of volunteer time from the influencers coming out and helping us in the field doing fisheries management stuff. Just one thing to mention, I had hoped to ask these ambassadors to kind of make themselves available as mentors as well. And one of the things I wanted to do was to give them gear so they could use that to take other people out fishing without feeling like they had to use their own stuff and maybe have it lost or broken or something like that. But COVID kind of messed that up on me because the product supply issues just got in the way and I wasn't able to get the gear I really wanted. The next slide. So, like Emily mentioned, I spent a lot of time taking screenshots of Facebook and Instagram posts, and I have a folder of, over 100 of them, and they were really great, and they ran the gamut. Again, I left the content specifically up to the influencers. I did not try to influence their posts in any way other than a few suggestions here or there. They kind of knew from the outset what I was looking for, and that was, just make really good, creative, engaging posts that you think will create awareness of fishing opportunities around the state, motivate people to go out and participate on their own, and keep that engagement and repetition going. Just make it look like fun, show lots of different, settings, shore fishing, stream fishing in a canoe or in a kayak, let people know that they don't need expensive boats to go fishing in Vermont and catch nice fish and have fun. Next slide. I did, stay in contact with most of these anglers as often as I could between my other work, just to remind them, oh, hey, bass season is starting on Saturday, maybe you could do a post about it, or walleye season is starting, or hey, next Saturday's free fishing day, hopefully you can get some posts. But again, I really tried to stay as hands-off as possible to make their content as authentic as possible. I really didn't want it to look like we were feeding them information. I just wanted people to see these people in Fish Vermont gear, having fun, and building their own followers and making increasing awareness of fishing opportunities in Vermont. Next slide. Some of them really got it and understood, even sort of the more intangible things, that, fishing often goes beyond catching fish. And we had some really great posts, again, completely uninfluenced by myself, of them just, making posts like what you see here in front of you, a pretty mountain, trout stream scene in Vermont. And, because different people go to fishing for different reasons, and it's not always about the big, giant lip and grip shots of a bass or something like that. Something else might resonate with people. And I had some influencers, again, I knew, or I had the feeling that this would be the case because I saw their content on their own as I was scoping them out. But this was, a really good type of content that we were seeing. So next slide. So as I mentioned, we got them out in the field quite often, or as much as we could. And again, all I did was just suggest that they post about their experience and what they learned and how they, saw the work that the department does to manage fisheries, and how it's connected to the fishing opportunities that they're also posting about on their own pages. And I thought, again, it was a very high value outcome of this project. Next slide. So I mentioned that some of the more active ones, I kind of reached out separately. I didn't do this with all 14, but in certain cases, there were some influencers that were really good at certain types of techniques or catching certain species. And we've started filming last year, and we're continuing that same thing this year with these same people, how-to videos, sort of 3 to 5 minute videos that we're editing ourselves, but we're filming with them as sort of the main subject about, how to cast a fly rod, how to fish a streamer, how to tie a drop shot rig, all that kind of stuff. And that's worked out really well. The other benefit that we've had is that I think we've started to develop some of these relationships on a longer term. Like Chelsea on the left here is one of my influencers that I got to know really well. And she's also participating in an angler recognition program that I run called the Vermont Master Angler Program. And she's sort of an adult onset angler, came to it late in life, and participated in the program and achieved Master Angler status last year during the Ambassador Project by fly fishing exclusively for warm water fish species that aren't normally thought of as targets with fly gear. And so I got her on the local news in Vermont to talk about being a female angler and learning it late in life, and what it means to her and what she enjoys about it. And these are the sorts of relationships that I think are going to pay off in the long run for a lot of other things. Next slide. So, this is we have a Flickr account that we're starting to build a really good library of these ambassadors, and we're using the imagery for a lot of different things, including one of them is now the cover of our 2022 fishing digest. So again, another sort of unexpected residual benefit of this project. Next slide. So, there were some things that I definitely learned, like I said at the beginning, that I didn't expect. The first one was people didn't like the word influencer. And I got a lot of no's at first when I reached out directly to people when I used that word, because people kind of associate influencers as sort of being someone out there for themselves or for personal gain, for income, and not as somebody who's truly an ambassador of something they really believe in. Just kind of, paid promotion type thing, a page stick. And so I quickly switched over to using ambassador instead of influencer, and then that really changed things. And you probably heard me switch back and forth between those two words. I keep the grant was actually called influencer, but ambassador is what I eventually went with, because that seemed to resonate better with these, you know, actual anglers here in Vermont. You know, staying engaged was important, but trying to balance that with, you know, not trying to direct what they post and their content, making sure that it's really authentic. I did lose some that just never really showed up to the game. You know, I don't know really what happened. They kind of stopped responding, and I need to, you know, kind of figure that out a little bit more. I do wish we could get some more sort of ethnicities and underrepresented groups, you know, represented here in Vermont. That's a hard lift here, but you know, that would be something I would work on more if we were to do this again. I'm not sure how to measure the impact this program had. Again, this is new to me. I really, you know, being a biologist, I like numbers and data and being able to, you know, show impacts of different treatments and efforts, and that's hard with this, I found out. I can look at the number of likes and the number of comments, and I'm not sure how that really translates over to overall participation or license sales, and maybe it doesn't matter. But you know, I did ask some of the ambassadors to kind of give me some of their private insights from posts from time to time, and some of them are really good about it. And I use Olivia here as an example. She gave me some really great stuff from her personal pages where, you know, she showed after she started posting these ambassador content, you know, her own impressions increased by 49%. Her account reach increased 94%. She was able to see that 2/3 of the profiles that her posts were reaching were not people who were already following her. So she was picking up new followers, and the Fish Vermont hashtag was a big part of that. So that was really great to see. Next slide, sorry. So future plans, I had one thing written into my grant which I was not able to accomplish, or in my sort of project plan here. I wanted a couple of influencers to actually not be avid anglers, and that's something I would like to pursue more in the future. Try to find somebody who's brand new but really is interested in it, and then provide them with all the gear they would need to go out and learn how to fish on their own and document their experience and progress throughout the summer as an ambassador who's learning themselves. I thought that would be a really unique take, and I had 2 people lined up to do that very thing, but as I said, I wasn't able to get the gear, and so that kind of fell apart on me. But yeah, that's it.
Great, that's awesome. Thank you very much, Sean. Appreciate all of your insights on your project. Remember, if you have a question, put it into the Q&A box on the right side of the screen, and we will ask it at the end. But now I'd like to turn it over to Shannon Hafner in the Communications, Outreach, and Marketing Bureau with the Iowa Department of Natural Resources. She's been with them for the past 22 years. She has coordinated marketing campaigns funded by RBFF, along with a variety of R3 communications and outreach efforts. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Shannon.
Thanks, Joanne. Great job, Sean. Hello, everyone. We created a community-based fishing campaign to test the effectiveness of social media influencer content to increase touch points across the end-to-end customer experience of 2020 new and reactivated anglers. Next slide, please. How did we find our potential influencers? We started our search in March. We looked for a mix of everyday Iowans with healthy social media followings, as well as a few Iowa-raised and local celebrities. We brainstormed a list of potential local, authentic influencers with an audience of 2,500 or more followers. Our list included local media personalities, both TV and radio, contributors to our Iowa Outdoors magazine, people who have shared photos or made connections with us through our social media channels, outdoor and travel bloggers, and local police departments. We got other leads from Brandt, our licensed vendor, and some RBFF referrals. Next slide, please. We used a social influencer discovery tool to help us reach and analyze potential social influence partners. On the screen there, you can see an example of a profile. It includes which social platforms influencer uses and the number of followers and engagement rate for each, key audience interests, and a variety of demographic information about the influencer's followers. To help prioritize our list, we used American Sports Fishing Association's angler personas to help us identify an inclusive group of potential social media influencers with different motivations, including connecting with family and friends, wanting an outdoor activity that they can connect with, getting away and relaxing, and passing on the love of fishing to others. This helped us ensure a diverse group of Iowa outdoor enthusiasts were represented. Next slide, please. We reached out to potential influencers through email, direct messaging, and comments on their social posts. When an influencer showed interest, the conversation transferred to email with Brandt's marketing firm to finalize scope, payment, and contracting. The contracts outlined how many posts each social media influencer was responsible for, what kind of posts, example, video, image library, feed, or stories, which channels they will post on, expectations for posting, response and messaging, photo and video quality standards, approval process, the timeline, code of conduct, termination clause, and content usage rights. We were planning on repurposing the photos and videos created by our social influencers for future campaigns, communications, and publications. So we made sure this was represented in our contract and that the rights were not only for a specific time period. The photo you see on the screen is our 2022 Iowa fishing regulations, and we used one of our social influencers as the photo. Next slide, please. So the next several slides highlight some of our different influencers that we use so that you can see the variety that we had. Our total budget was $25,275. We provided talking points and messages and call to actions to the influencers, including reminding first-time fishing license buyers of the fun they had in 2020, highlighting convenient local areas to fish, and showcasing how easy it is to incorporate fishing into any outdoor trip. Before the post went live, we've reviewed the content and captions for a positive and encouraging voice and accurate information. So you see here we've got Tracy Lawrence. He posted onto his social media channel when he was on tour in Iowa. Brandt helped us get this connection. The video had 18,695 views. Next slide, please. Another fun one was the Dew Tour Summer Olympic Trials for skateboarding were in Des Moines, Iowa in May of 2021. We partnered with Dew Tour and RBFF to promote fishing and outdoor recreation opportunities across the state to non-traditional target audience attending, viewing, or participating in the event. And as part of that, we had two of the skaters do a video of them fishing on a local community pond. Next slide, please. We also had what we called everyday Iowans Angela was a mom blogger and she liked promoting getting outside. So you'll see several in the $250 range there. And that was very common for what we call our everyday Iowans. And that included video content, 1 feed post, and 2 story posts. Next slide, please. Here's another one that in our $250 post, you'll see Devin again here in another slide too. Next slide, please. So Hello Iowa, that is a local lifestyle television show. And so we did a live segment at one of our Fish Local community ponds. We had Tyler, our Fish Local biologist, and then Devin that you saw before, she was one of our influencers. And so it was a live segment with Megan teaching her how to fish. Next slide, please. The Hunting Public filmed video contest for us to use in digital advertisements. That was, Brant helped us get that connection. Next slide, please. Des Moines Mom, it's a locally focused parenting resource to connect and support moms and families in the Des Moines metro area. So theirs was a little bit different. We had 2 Instagram stories, 2 Facebook posts, and then we also had a blog on their website that was promoting family fishing in the Des Moines area and also had tips for taking kids fishing. Next slide, please. Des Moines Hummingbirds. Now this is a fun, unique partnership. It's an organized group of Des Moines area micro-influencers that engage with local businesses and events and share their experience on their social platforms. So they've got a lot of different options that businesses can use their hummingbirds. We did a one-time partnership. So we had 12 individuals posting on their social media about fishing in Iowa in exchange for a Bass Pro card and a license reimbursement. Next slide, please. Brian is one of our photographers and contributors to our Iowa Outdoors magazine. So he provided some video for us. Next slide, please. And here's another one of that provided video for us so we can use in digital advertisements. Next slide, please. And yet another one. Again, several of them that we had our local, what we call common Iowans that like to fish and posting information for us, making videos. Next slide, please. More than 90 pieces of video and photo content were created and submitted by our content creators. Now, last spring, we spent a lot of the time actually creating it. So most of the videos we will be using this year in some of our campaigns. But here are some of the ones that we actually used for digital advertising during the campaign last year. We have used photos from this campaign and marketing emails to licensed buyers, a spring fishing forecast article in our Iowa Outdoors magazine, and then you saw the cover of the fishing regulations in an earlier slide. So skateboarders is being used in digital ads for this year's marketing campaign that we received a grant for RBFF for Iowa recreational paddlers, and trying to promote them to go out and kayak fish. Next slide, please. So the goal of our campaign was to build foundational relationships with Iowa-based social influencers, create high-quality content, and share it through retention-based marketing channels in which our 2020 customers were engaging through social posts, emails, and website content. So engagement was our primary metric and revenue generated was secondary, but that kind of shows you this would be license purchases. Next slide, please. So one thing that we really learned that partnering with news media influencers required a slightly different approach than the partnership with the everyday Iowans. So we had slightly a different rule with them. Some of them have media restrictions on participating in a paid campaign, so they couldn't help us out with that. But we provided information and content to develop unpaid organic news stories and ask them to post the feeds on their individual social media feeds. Next slide, please. So our next steps, we have a lot of the videos that were created last year that we're going to use for this year's digital ads and marketing campaigns. We will work with a select of the social media influencers identified through this campaign on some more things for this spring. So this campaign was really important to us. We have put together plans to use social media influencer created content and develop an ambassador program for several years, but we haven't had the capacity to roll out a full program. Thanks to RBFF funding, it helped us to start build the relationships with these Iowa-based social media influencers. The content from these influencers will leverage and support the efforts of our Fish Local program by building relationships with social outdoors influencers and their audiences, creating an authentic link to fishing communities around the state, and generating high quality photo and video content for DNR's use across its platforms and marketing campaigns. Next slide, please. That's all I have. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much, Shannon. As you can see from Emily's tips and Sean and Shannon's example, there's really no one size fits all. So you'll have to kind of take all the information you've learned and see what fits for your state agency. We do have some time for questions. So if you have a question, please put it into the Q&A box on the right side of your screen. We do have a few questions. The first few, I think I'm going to combine into one because they're very similar questions, but this is more for Shannon and Sean. How do you reach out to influencers that are affiliated with a brand? Does this cause a problem with a state agency? Is there issues with violating the solicitation laws?
Well, this is Sean. I can answer how I addressed that, and that was to stay away from it completely. So one of my sort of review selection criteria I had in my own head as I was looking at people is if they were filling their posts with, you know, a ton of brand hashtags because they were somehow sponsored by them, that just ruled them out for me for this particular project and purpose. That's not the direction I wanted to go, so I just avoided it completely. So yeah, but that's a good question. It's something I observed right away, is that there's a lot of people out there that are hashtagging all the companies and all the gear that they use, and I didn't want that to be part of what we were using to promote fishing here.
Gotcha, thanks. A question for Shannon is, how did you attribute certain license sales to money spent on social posts?
So with Brant, we had pixels on our ads, and then that tracks through to the click-throughs to their website, and then we can track if somebody actually from an ad then clicked through and bought a license.
That's a great resource, thank you. For Sean, you mentioned a Flickr account. Is this where ambassadors upload their pictures to have storage for your team, or is this something you share with the public?
Yeah, we have two Flickr accounts. We have one that we share with the public, and then we found out not that long ago that Flickr provides an unlimited storage space for government agencies with no restrictions for free. So we've started using that as our way of kind of archiving and cataloging all the media content that we've accumulated, both through the ambassador program and other purposes. But we never used it as a, as a way to transfer content back and forth between us and the ambassadors. Yeah, we just basically, had them email us stuff, or if our photographer Dan was out and they had a bunch of photos that we wanted them to have from our camera for their own use to post, we would just email them, a selection of them.
Great, thank you. I know we're over, but I'm going to ask just one more question, because I feel like several people probably would look for this. Do either of you have a specific process for vetting influencers to work with?
This is Shannon. We made our list, and then we tried to look through some of their posts and kind of see if we agree with what they were posting, and thought if it was a good fit. And then again, we use that social media tool so we can kind of gauge too and see like what kind of audience they have.
Yeah, we're kind of the same. I didn't really have a set process, but I had sort of a list of things that I was looking for and things that were also or would be red flags to me. So I tried to avoid people that were, overly political or, posting controversial stuff. There might be some content that was really great, but then interspersed in their feed, if you went back far enough in their history, you'd see some things that you maybe wouldn't necessarily want associated with our state agency. So again, it was just kind of an informal checklist in my own mind, and that I had also written down that, if I just saw something that didn't look right or made me feel like it wouldn't represent our department well, we didn't pursue that person.
Gotcha, great. Thank you both. Well, unfortunately, we are out of time. For all attendees, if you have any further questions, we will be emailing out to let you know when the information is online. And in that email, I'll include email addresses for all of our presenters if you want to follow up with them directly. But as you leave today's webinar, please remember to take the survey that's going to pop up so we can use your feedback for future webinars. Thank you once again, Emily, Sean, and Shannon. Definitely appreciate all of your help and information today.